Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Noz and this is Omnichannel X's Omnichannel Podcast. Omnichannel X is brought to you by Urbina Consulting. Omnichannel X is our international learning portal where we host the thought leaders and case studies we think will be most helpful for content-rich organizations trying to build better relationships across all touchpoints. Now, enjoy the show. Hello, everybody. This is Noz the host of the Omnichannel Podcast, brought to you by Urbina Consulting and Omnichannel X. This episode is with Thomas Molenaar. He is head of digital marketing at Dechra Pharmaceuticals. Dechra are a manufacturer of veterinary medicines for all of your dogs and cats and llamas out there. Dechra are at the beginning stage of their omnichannel journey. So we're going to be talking about how you get started on putting together your strategy, what your first steps are in terms of data integration, people process integration, top-down, bottom-up alignment, the various channels that can be part of your strategy, events, offline, print, human channels, working with your colleagues who are content creators and also need content to do their jobs, building relationships with omnichannel as a core part of your strategy, and then also some of the barriers that you run into as you're getting started. So we hope you enjoy the episode. Okay, everybody, thank you for joining. I'm here with Thomas Molenaar of Dechra Pharmaceuticals. I'm happy to have you, Thomas. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit to the audience?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me here today, Noz. I am Thomas Molenaar. I'm the head of digital marketing at Dechra Pharmaceuticals. So a little bit about my background. I originally graduated with a degree in art history, having the dreams and aspirations to become an arts curator. That didn't work out, but I did discover marketing, and I kind of gradually flowed into marketing, starting out in paid search, and over the years getting more acquainted with core marketing principles, but also with different channels. Which over the years led me to kind of evolve my role as a marketeer, and leading to currently working as the head of digital marketing at Dechra.
Excellent. I love that path from art. I studied literature and classical civilizations.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that, in a way, I think it really helps because one thing that you get in the humanities is coming at problems from a variety of different angles. Mm-hmm. Which I think is something that is really interesting when it comes to marketing as well, making sure that there's not one whole truth. There's different ways to, solve a problem in that way and analyze your data.
Absolutely, and then there's pros and cons to every approach. There's there's the philosophy of how we work and kind of thinking what are there's lots of things like the long-term impacts of how we do things. I think people are very conscious now that we used to the whole world in a variety of spheres would kind of jump in, and now we're with the zeitgeist, the kind of awareness in society as well. What is this going to mean in 5-10 years, or is this the right long-term plan of action?
Yeah.
Long-term thinking has come to the West. Yeah. So we're here on the Omnichannel Podcast, brought to you by Omnichannel X. So Thomas, I'm interested to hear your definition of omnichannel marketing. We're often talking about omnichannel from different roles, different perspectives, and this is interesting to speak at it from a marketing point of view. So what is your definition? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, I think for me it always comes back to what it isn't, and usually when the term omnichannel marketing starts, a lot of people start panicking about, are we now having to use every available channel to us to become truly omnichannel? Whereas I think for me, it's purely about the integration of channels, making sure that there's a consistency in messaging across channels, making sure that there's visibility of the data that is can be used to kind of enhance and complement touch points as well, and complement channels. So you can be omnichannel with just a few channels as long as they're consistent and as long as they're fully integrated.
Wow. Preaching to the choir. I couldn't agree more. I think that there was a sort of channel panic a while ago, that we had to be on all the channels, and the intention was to be on all the channels, be everywhere. And I feel that that's dying down when I talk to most people, and it's no longer they realize that's an impossibility. no brand, no matter how deep your pockets, is going to be on all the channels. And that doesn't even make sense because channels can also come and go.
Yeah,
So it's about how you are ready for new channels and what you do when a new channel pops up,
yeah,
um, and having a really intentional strategy about the channels that you do have,
yeah,
uh, as a whole. So I really, yeah, definitely aligned with your definition there.
yeah.
So
Yeah, I
you've
really
been,
like.
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I just wanted to say I actually really like the term channel panic, so I might steal that going forward. I think that that's very much kind of, it comes up a lot where people start thinking about how do we familiarize ourselves with the channels, and it comes back to the idea about like, are the channels actually serving a purpose? So, for your customers' needs, what channels do they actually require to solve those needs?
Mhm.
And those are the ones to focus on. But yeah, I like that word channel panic actually. It's a
Yeah,
good
yeah,
one.
absolutely. And one I've definitely seen is a channel panic because a channel is just literally big. For example, I had oh, I don't remember the example. I think it was a baking company or something. It was some. They were a very particular industry.
Mm,
It wasn't like shoes or something. It was something that had a particular target audience, and there was this one channel that was just bursting out on the scene. Everyone was going on it, et cetera, et cetera. So suddenly, all this pressure to get on Snapchat or whatever it was. And I remember the contact I was talking to going, "Our audience isn't there. The channel is big, the channel is popular, but
mm,
not with our audience." So
yeah,
this kind of thing going, fear of missing out, but at a corporate level.
yeah,
Everybody's talking about blah, we should be on blah, but that doesn't mean that your people are there or that they go there in a mood or with an interest to talk about what your value proposition is.
yeah, yeah. No, definitely.
Okay, so you've actually been doing some omnichannel projects, and we're very much about the practical here, about real lessons learned. We do talk a theory game because you have to think about what's coming and understand the theory. But I really like to be able to talk about real stories. So can you tell us a bit about your projects? Very interested in what kind of audiences and the kind of the ecosystem of stakeholders you would be addressing, what
Yeah,
channels, what types of content, are they your own channels, third party channels, or some mix?
yeah. I mean, so I think for us, where we currently are is we're very much, and I think that's the same for everyone. We're on an omni-channel journey, and we're in very early stages of the omni-channel journey. In that, there's a lot of education happening around the company about the concept of omni-channel. There's a lot of interesting initiatives in terms of trying to match channels up. We're making sure that the consistency in messaging is there. If I look at my projects, I think what I'm really working on is making sure that the conditions and the infrastructure is in place for our company to become omni-channel. So that's focusing on channel integration, that's focusing on making sure that the data, that the tools are there for our content teams and our product managers to be able to, when they, when they feel that they're ready to put that omni-channel message out, the tools are already there.
Hmm.
So I'd say, can you, if I have to talk a bit about audiences, we're doing a lot of research currently to just get an understanding of what are the touch points and the channels that our customers use. And that's, for me, always goes back to customer needs. So it's the research stage, trying to figure out, well, what touch points do we actually need to develop for our customers, where they will require information or where they will require our services, to then start thinking about how can we connect them better, how do we make sure that the data quality is there. So it's almost kind of like at step -1, where we're still
Hmm.
putting the conditions into place around omnichannel. And from a communications point of view, I think it's purely focused on consistency in content, making sure that we orchestrate kind of the whole omnichannel process better, by not looking at as separate channels in that way.
Hmm. Well, so let's try to make it a bit more concrete for the listeners. So
Yeah,
Dechra is not I wouldn't say Dekra's a household name. Like there's probably a lot of people who, when we talk about your audience, can you tell us a bit like literally what kind of people are you trying to target? And what I'm interested, especially is when we're talking omni-channel, is interaction between those people. It's
yeah,
very interesting if you're talking to multiple stakeholders, how do they relate to each other? What are their roles, and how do you have to target the audience as a whole?
Yeah, of course. So if you look at our industry, so we're a manufacturer of pharmaceutical products for the animal healthcare industry. So our primary audience will be veterinarians and veterinary professionals.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of overlap between us and human pharma, but there's also, some key differences, and definitely when it comes to maturity, there's some differences. I think as an industry, we're still a couple of years behind human pharma. So our key, I think one of the key challenges that we face is understanding and getting to know our audience better. So we know that we're talking to veterinarians, but we are still at very early stages to be very clear to how we segment between veterinarians. So that
Mm.
goes in terms of what are the types of species that they treat, what are the therapy areas that they specialize in. So do they specialize in dermatology? Do they specialize in anesthesia and analgesia? Um, then there's also the question about, well, what kind of messaging do they actually prefer? Do they look at the commercial offering that we have? Are they more there from a scientific angle, from an emotional angle as well? So when we look at our different audiences, it's very much about trying to understand our customers in how they interact with our channels. So how do they interact with digital means, but also offline as well? And how do we find that perfect mix in serving up that content in the right way? So the way that we're embarking on that journey is very much around, we know that our customers value the offline touch points that we have. That's the relationships that our sales reps have with our customers, the relationships that our customers have with our technical teams. So if they buy one of our products and they're not 100% sure how to apply it, or they've got questions around it, we've got a whole team of veterinarians at Dechra as well, to be able to provide those services. And we really pride ourselves on having that knowledge in-house. And that's also part of our brand proposition, to come at things from the veterinary's perspective, with having kind of our customers as part of the organization as well. So what we're trying to do now as part of this omni-channel journey is, how do we take those relationships, those people relationships, and how do we extend them online, so that across every touch point, our veterinarians have the idea that it's the same high quality service we provide as the ones that they have with our with the offline counterparts, with the people in the organization as well.
Mm.
So from there, we know that we just can't depend on our offline relationships anymore. It's the 21st century.
Mm.
Even in healthcare, it's the 21st century. Customers will be online. They will be
Sometimes I
finding.
think it's just become the 21st century.
It's yeah, well, definitely in animal healthcare. Sometimes we're laggards in that way, but I think there's a change happening. And as you said, with audiences changing, with things like Snapchat and TikTok, they might not be relevant now with our core customers, but maybe when that whole generation grows up and become the new generation of vets, it will become very relevant as well. So
Hmm.
does that answer your question, Oz?
Yeah, it does. I'm interested. So it raises a couple of other interesting questions. Um, the role of different types of, for example, influencer. So you're talking about different specialties. I know that when we're talking with our pharma clients, the role of the influencer, or opinion leader, as it's often called, is
Yeah,
really interesting, and I think that's something that I think the audience might want to hear about, because I think that concept is relevant to any industry. So I'm interested to see how you've been thinking about influencers, and I don't want to forget, you mentioned something which is very near and dear to my heart, which is the people channel.
yeah,
And I wanted to know, when you're looking at marketing, whether you are seeing part of your role as providing assets and knowledge to those people, or deriving assets and knowledge from those people as part of your strategy. So those are my two follow-up questions to that. But yeah, definitely.
yeah, yeah. So I think the first one, especially in pharma, key opinion leaders are essential. And again, I mean, we've got our veterinary professionals in the organization that liaise with key opinion leaders because they
Hmm.
speak the same language. But they are, I think it's also from our other customers. There's always a skepticism around pharmaceutical manufacturers. Always, we are biased. We want to sell our product.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so key opinion leaders are essential in having that sort of neutral voice in the discussion and making sure like, hey, this product from Dechra or this treatment is actually, is effective and is something that from a specialism, something that we will endorse. So it's a fine line and a fine balance between making sure that you can use those key opinion leaders in create those partnerships and making sure that they are there to also uh, promote kind of like the Dechra solution that's out there, but equally also make sure that you don't make them into influencers where they lose that neutrality and
Legitimacy.
yeah, have that thing that they keep that credibility and authenticity as well. And we only recently finished a piece of customer research where when it comes to veterinarians, and I can imagine for healthcare professionals in general, accessing information online, those are the two key parts: credibility, the authenticity, making sure that when they find information, it's information they can trust.
Hmm.
So I think that's kind of where for us key opinion leaders are essential, and also something where we can still do a lot more compared to where we currently are and what we currently do.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a bit I was kind of hoping you would drill down into is what is, for, again, very practically speaking, what can you do? What kind of marker, like what can our listeners, because that's not done. I'm seeing time and again, this siloing between the knowledge centers of the
yeah,
business and marketing. And so,
yeah,
and often marketing goes out and pays agencies to go get knowledge that they can publish that their own people in the next offices down the hall have.
yeah.
And then they publish it to the public, but that they don't share it with the internal people. So I'm interested in terms of practical terms. What can we do? What is your vision of how that relationship could work better?
I mean, they in essence are the content creators, aren't they? And I think we sometimes separate that out too much. Just in very practical terms, we're now doing a large SEO audit as well and going through our content. And when it comes to key opinion leaders, or in our case, when it comes to veterinarians, they are the ones that should put the content out. But within the guidelines to making sure that the content out that's there, it should be the tandem between the SEO expert in this case and the key opinion leader to create that partnership and making sure that we harness that knowledge
Yeah.
in the most efficient way. And I think that's the same
Just
across
just checking here. Just when you say key opinion leader, do you mean key opinion leaders you have on staff or ones
both.
out? Both,
Both.
both.
Yeah. I
Right.
think I think there's a case for both. I mean, we have brilliant people on staff that can create a lot of content who are, I mean, you can perceive them as being biased, but equally they're veterinary professionals. So I think there's definitely that expertise and that knowledge there, and obviously also making sure that you can start with applying content from external key opinion leaders and seeing how you can leverage that in creating articles of interest or special kind of features on websites as well. And that for me is something that can be extended across all channels. It's not something that just comes with websites. It's social media. But it's also the offline conferences, etc., symposiums. So I think it's a source where we don't have the answer yet, but definitely
Mhm.
acknowledge that it's something that we can do a lot more with.
Absolutely, yeah. I actually one of my most popular examples at a content marketing conference was showing that you can repackage messaging if you have the right tools and methodologies, and reuse nuggets, Lego pieces
Yeah,
of content for web, social, print, symposium content, posters, and even intranet content, so that your people
yeah,
have the latest messaging. And
yeah.
that's it's I think it's very relevant. And I think so I'd asked you about the, yeah, key opinion leaders as a channel, and yeah, I think you covered both my questions. So what do you see your biggest challenges? Like, That's all the good stuff, the happy path, the vision. What are you seeing that holds you back? And you don't have to get too detailed about if you don't want, but what do you think, if you want to be general, in healthcare marketing and in omnichannel marketing in general, what do you feel the biggest barriers are?
I think so one of your previous questions was about kind of like the role of people,
Mhm,
and I think that is, so for me fundamentally, this is everything is about people. And I think the biggest challenge that we have in the organization, which is very common, is
mm,
alignment between teams, and is making sure that everyone is moving in the same direction, which especially for omnichannel, when every channel complements each other, there's it's hard to move forward some parts if there's no alignment between functions or between teams, between
mhm,
sales and marketing organizations, but also between channel owners. So I think internally that's one of the biggest barriers that we have. I think externally, which can't be helped, is in our case a regulatory environment, which
mhm,
just makes some how do I put that? It just makes things more complicated in terms of how we want to kind of orchestrate and put content out in some
mhm,
cases. But I think overall, our biggest challenge is probably internally in making sure that we are truly committed to all go in the same direction and
mhm.
break down barriers. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something inherently, and we referred to this many times on the podcast, inherently broken about the
Mm.
way that organizations are built, and what their goal is. So their organizations are trying to build relationships with their audience that will be long lasting, enduring, mutually beneficial, mutually profitable, and that's good for the audience and it's good for the brand. Um, but that requires that you can build a relationship with a brand, which is actually not quite so easy. We talk about it. We do build relationships with brands, but they're not the best or most healthy relationships because the brand is built in departments. We have different teams, different specialisms, different budgets, different timelines, different system owners, different channels and channel owners, and product lines and business units. And there's all this fragmentation within the brands. So building a relationship with this heterogeneous, often very um, difficult to relate with entity gets really complicated. So I think that I agree that that's the heart of it. Is If you're going to build a relationship with something as complicated as a multinational corporation, then it requires the people in there to be dedicated to working across those lines.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I,
Agreed.
we've kind of given up on silo busting. That term, I used to say it a lot. I don't anymore. Now we're talking about kind of silo piping. Can you
Yeah.
run pipelines and communication flows between these silos so that the whole thing operates as a single network, as opposed to now where it can be so fragmented. Left hand really doesn't know what the right hand is doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and in the end, for me, it just comes back to strategy. It's about making sure that strategy is understood across the business,
Hmm.
and I think that the way that you phrase it in terms of silo pipelining is probably the more realistic one, because you can't there are different functions, the different people, the different skill sets. You want those
Different
skill sets,
personalities.
yeah, different personalities, and you want to connect those, but you can't open up the house completely in that way. I mean, you want to build a road between the houses, but you don't want to build one big house in that way. So yeah, no, I think that's definitely where we currently are. And one thing is strategy. The other thing is also the leadership challenge in that, in making sure that it needs to be steered from the top, and coming down, coming up from the bottom, making sure that there's a lot of cross-functional initiatives and cross-functional projects as well. It's not a one-way street, but I think it's a very complicated um, yeah, it's a very complicated issue, and no straightforward solution, especially the bigger and the more kind of, I wouldn't say fragmented, but the larger the matrix kind of becomes in the organization. It's just a very, it's a challenging issue to solve.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's a big part of it. I'm interested to ask you about how you measure that. So you mentioned strategy being core, and so for when I hear strategy, I think about metrics.
Yeah.
So we have things that we want to do. How do we know that we're doing them? How do we actually report back in a quantifiable way that this is actually happening? I think that that's, I'm interested to know what you think about that. And if you can, if you, I'm interested, I'm talking to a lot of our customers about content system and CRM system
Mm.
integration. So we have our customer relationship data where tons of the business is building literally relationships. It's the customer relationship management system,
Yeah.
um, the CRM, uh, and then marketing systems are often very divorced from that,
Yeah.
both from a data and a content point of view. Have you been looking at that and can you talk to a little bit about the measurement side of your strategy?
Yeah. I mean, that's what keeps me awake at night, I'd say. I mean, again, like, I think if there's anything, that kind of puts all this together is that it's our maturity as an organization, and it's really being at the start of that journey, and also recognizing that, especially with data being so complex, um, there's a lot of steps that we need to take before we can get the measures in place that we'd like to take in place, like to put in place, which are obviously related to return on investment, and to revenue. So I think we are um, trying to think about the easiest way to put that together. What we're looking at now is finding those key metrics that we can measure currently, and that will give an indication as to are we on the right track, as you just
Mhm.
suggested. Which currently, I think one of the key, most important ones is customer satisfaction and customer related metrics in terms of, are we actually delivering the services that the customers expect from us? And are we able to kind of like grow from there in making those metrics more sophisticated to get a better understanding of the key parts? Another part of it is obviously, if we break down the omnichannel part, and how is each of our channels performing? How are our different platforms performing? And can we come up with a framework, with a structure in which we actually get some sort of picture of the overall health? So if we put all these platforms together, are we are we in a position then to get more clarity on what is our performance from an omni-channel perspective? And we've just started talks with a third-party agency to help us on that journey, because realistically, where we currently are, we will need that help, and we will need that hand-holding in order to define those metrics for us. That kind of immediately flows into your next question as well, about how are those platforms connected. That's a big part of our omni-channel kind of our strategy that we're looking at, is how do we integrate our, not just our channels, not just our messaging, but also our platforms as well. And that can be on a more technical level between API integrations, but also how do they complement each other? What is their role? What is their purpose within the larger kind of framework that we're trying to achieve? And how do we make sure that we connect the bits that can be connected? And then the data that comes out of it is from a performance point of view, but also very much from an insights point of view. Make sure that we then combine those insights and create one consistent story about our customers and about kind of the insights that we have there, rather than, we talked about silo busting before. I think there's also that silo busting between platforms and between channels that needs to happen to make sure
Mhm.
to really get that integration and that omni-channel approach in place as well. So yeah, but we're again very early stages of that journey, but it's definitely our main focus, because I think that without creating that infrastructure and making sure those connections are there, then there's no way forward in becoming omni-channel.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, do you have examples where you have taken concrete steps that you've been able to roll out that you feel have made a difference?
So we've recently started the implementation of a customer data platform, and that for us is a really big step forward, where we have a single source to plug in all our different data sources, from analytics, from our social media, from our marketing automation platform, from our CRM, to really stitch that data together and get a very clear understanding of who our customers are, what their what their online behavior looks like, what their interactions look like, which then gives us a really, really powerful data to start segmenting into very create very granular segments and also be able to kind of personalize our messaging as well. So I think that's for us a really big step to start pulling data together in order to become more customer focused and be able to kind of create that messaging on a personalized basis rather than blanket kind of push messaging and hope that it hits the mark somewhere.
Mm. Yeah, sometimes we're only a little away from spamming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually I have some research I'm going to be sharing next week on our I don't, depending on when you're listening to this, I'm doing a joint webinar with Sanofi, who's one of our customers, and they did internal research. I don't have the I think I don't know if I have the number to hand, but I believe that the number the data that they have on file. Yeah, I do have it here. Was that 55% of healthcare professionals feel overwhelmed by the content they receive and question the accuracy and trustworthiness.
Mm-hmm.
And 65% of healthcare professionals feel at least one pharma company has spammed them. So, and this raises an interesting point for all omnichannel initiatives. You're trying to build this relationship and you're trying to build your brand relationship and your brand, but we're kind of held back a little bit by our industries in the sense that if you are the first one to be the best, that's great. It's hard to change the overall perception because the audience will still be going, oh well, that kind of company spams me, and if there's an exception to the rule, the generalization is still there for quite a while. And that presents an interesting challenge, I think, that you're going to face and that we're all facing as we go omnichannel, is continuing to keep management interested. That what are the short-term metrics that we can affect, but there are certain perceptions that'll be very difficult for us to isolate because there'll be a lot of noise. So if you ask people whether they feel they're getting too much content, it's hard for them to filter out. How do I get too much content from Dechra or Sanofi or Eli Lilly versus the general feeling they have about getting content from your type of company?
Yeah.
So you have to break down the short-term and the long-term metrics in your strategy.
Definitely. I think as well, especially in our industry, people don't have time. And that's the biggest, that's what we get back from our customers is there's so much pressure at work and there's so little time. So how do you then stand out and get your message across? And for us, I think one of the, as I mentioned, key objectives is how do we extend those personal relationships that we have online? So can we stand out by making sure that the messaging that is being put out through those personal relationships as well, which is why I think, I'm the head of digital marketing, but I think the offline component is at this stage as or not far more important than the digital component. Where we currently are, like it needs to complement together in that way. So how we get that offline component on board is just by really high quality data, because I think that the people that have built up these relationships over the years are also reluctant to act upon data that they don't know for 100% they can trust. And I think as well, once we start personalizing it and saying, well, we want emails that have pre-approved content but come via sales reps, then our sales reps would like to be absolutely sure that the messaging within those emails is accurate and is appropriate for their customers. So I think again that role of data is so critical in making sure that you can move this forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're kind of coming not quite to the end of time. So I just had a couple more questions. I'm interested to see what trends do you foresee in the field of omnichannel marketing? So not what you're working on now, but sort of on your vision on the horizon. What do you see as exciting, or what do you see as important and upcoming that people should be aware about?
I think, I mean, just to stay with basically every other post on LinkedIn, I think artificial intelligence is just going to be a game changer across how we produce content, also how we conduct marketing, how we manage data. I think for me, that's really the biggest one out there currently, just because um, if you look at things like ChatGPT, for me, the biggest question is not how are we going to utilize it to support with our content generation, but how are our customers going to interact with either ChatGPT or other AI products to access information going forward? And how, as an industry, how as marketeers do we then equip ourselves to be able to deal with that challenge? Because we've just gotten acquainted to the whole SEO thing. People go to Google to find information, and we know how that works. I think that for
Barely.
me is a trend that's really worth watching over the next couple of years, and there's a lot of. I embrace it. I can completely understand the risks on many different levels, but I think it's just going to be very exciting to see what opportunities it brings with it as well.
I think you're the first person I've asked that question who talked about AI from the consumption side, which is a very, like, I think that's great because I think that's extremely important and we're forgetting it a lot, is that we're very excited about how can we use it as creators and content, orchestrators and so on internally. But kind of forgetting that the audience is also going to be using these same tools to deconstruct and find what we put out there. So that I actually saw a comic book a comic strip which put it perfectly, where you got a marketer, it's got one guy sitting at his desk telling a colleague, this is great, I can just type in a few lines and ChatGPT will make it look like I wrote this email. And then you've got the next panel is on the other guy sitting on the opposite side of the computer going, oh, it's fantastic. Now I've got ChatGPT. I can put the emails in and pretend I read them.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good way to putting it as well. And turning it the other way around, we're going to have a lot of very, very well-informed pet owners going into veterinary practices going forward, because the information is not just accessible easily, but also explained in a very, very easy to digest way that doesn't allow pet owners, or doesn't require pet owners, to dig through large scientific articles. So how are we going to support our customers with dealing with that? Dr. Google is already a problem. What's Dr.
Yes.
ChatGPT going to look like, basically?
Yes. Thank
So
you.
yeah, I
Yes.
think it's a very interesting future.
Yes, I love it. Thank you so much for raising that. Okay. Do you have any last tips to give our audience, or any resources that they should check out if they're interested in learning more about implementing on a channel strategy?
I think the tip. So I was speaking at a event a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about we talked about kind of this idea of I'd say silo pipelining now instead of breaking down silos. But that is the element of curiosity, and I think the only way to become omnichannel is really try to dig into what is it that other parts of the business are doing. How do we involve them in the discussion? How do we it's really that part of trying to get to understand your business outside of marketing as well, and making sure that you build those relationships with other parts of the business. When it comes to separate resources, that's a really good question. I would usually go to things like BCG, Marketing Week, those sorts of industry standard sources as well. I don't know if there's any nuggets. Let me turn around and see if I've got it here. I started reading Data and Analytics Strategies for Business not too long ago, which is a great book as well, in order to get your head around the data conundrum. So I think that's as far as I can get with it.
Okay. Yeah, it's Data and Analytics Strategies for Business by Simon Asplin Taylor.
This is the one. Yeah, sorry, I had to
Yeah,
get
no
it from the
problem.
bottom shelf. But yeah, it's a great book. It's very informative, very practical as well. And even for people who aren't data scientists or data data experts. I think it just reads very well in terms of how do you make data work for your business. So definitely would recommend this as a read for anyone that's interested in data.
Great. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I got some social channels and a book. I think that's great. Fantastic. Okay, so Thomas, thank you much for your time. I really appreciated our chat, and maybe we'll have you back on the podcast someday.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Thank you for listening. This has been the Omnichannel podcast with your host, Noz Urbina, founder of Urbina Consulting. Let us know on LinkedIn or Twitter what you liked from this episode, what you think we missed, and who you would like us to interview next. Now that you've heard what we're passionate about, you can also check out urbinaconsulting.com to find out a little bit about what we do. Thank you so much, and see you next time.